Okay. Perfect, thank you. So a little bit about us, if anyone's kind of new to Community Energy Scotland. We're a registered charity supporting community groups with energy and sustainability projects. We have members across Scotland and many members in the Western Isles. And our aim is to strengthen and empower local communities through kind of enabling them to carry out their own projects. And as I said earlier, this week has been supported by Peatland Action and Pebble Trust. I didn't say earlier, but I'm Matthew Logan. I'm a development officer with Community Energy Scotland, working in the Outer Hebrides, and also joined by my manager, Kathleen MacDonald, today, who also works in the Outer Hebrides. The speaker, we're lucky tonight to be joined by Ewan MacLeod from Horshader Community Development. Ewan is the development manager there at Horshader, has been involved in a number of their projects over recent years, and kind of overseeing the projects, but also getting stuck in himself. I won't go into too much detail as that might spoil the presentation, but yeah, really excited to hear from Ewan about what the group's been up to and the kind of various priorities or activities they're looking to do in the future around sustainability. So I think that's sort of enough from me at the moment. I think as there's not too many of us on tonight, it might be good to just do a quick round of introductions. So if everyone's okay, when it's passed on to you to come on and introduce yourself, say what you're interested in about this event, then that would be great. I'll start by passing on to Kathleen.
Hi everyone, my name is Kathleen MacDonald, and like Matthew said, I work for Community Energy Scotland as well, based in the Western Isles, and I've been here working for CES for around 13 or 14 years, and it's been a very interesting time, and it's very exciting at the current time just to be hearing more from communities and hearing more about what options there are to be more sustainable. So I'll pass on to Ewan.
Which one?
Sorry, yes, there's two Ewans. I'll go for Ewan Scott since Ewan MacLeod is presenting. Sorry.
Hi there. I'm Ewan Scott. I am the other Ewan's equivalent down here in Barron Vertice Community Limited. What am I interested in particularly tonight is the art project, the tree nursery side of affairs, and how things are progressing. Thanks.
And we'll maybe go to Eva next. If you're able, hopefully you're hearing us okay, Eva. You've been able to connect. If you fancy giving a quick introduction, then you're very welcome to just now, but no pressure if you'd rather not. No worries. We'll go over to Christine. Likewise, Christine, if you're keen to give an introduction, then you're very welcome to, but no pressure if not.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay, I'm Christine Amos, and I'm the operations manager at the Galston Estate Trust, which is not too far from Horshader. And I'm just on tonight, I'm just really interested to hear how your projects are going, Ewan, and also I'm really keen to hear about your tree project. So looking forward to it.
Great, thanks, Christine. Yeah, just a message in the chat from Eva saying she can't get the microphone to turn on again, but says hello to everyone. So finally, we'll go to DJ.
Good evening. I was awake. Good to be here. This is the final night, and I'm really looking forward to Ewan's presentation on all the good work that Horshader have been doing. I'm John McSween. I'm General Manager of Point of Sandwich Trust. Have been so for since 2014. Does that make it 7 years? Time I looked for another job then. But it's really been a good week. Loads and loads of ideas out there, loads of great presentations. And like Ewan, I'm particularly interested in the ARC project because we have our own woodland trust project going, which covers all of the islands. And to date, we've planted by next spring, we'll have planted 160,000 native species in the Western Isles. And it really is good to see at least a couple, maybe even 3 local nurseries spring up on the back of the work that we've been doing for the last few years.
That's fab. Thanks, DJ. Perfect. Well, without further ado, then I'll pass over to Ewan McLeod for your presentation. Thanks, Ewan.
Thanks, Matthew and Kathleen, and really nice to see everyone. All people I know pretty well. I've met a few times anyway, and good to see you all. I'm going to start sharing my screen just now. So I think you all know me as well. So I've got the presentation, like the introduction. We'll talk about some of the little bit of background on Horshader, some of the services we run, and then focus. I'd like to highlight a few of the key eco projects that we've been working on recently, and then finally just some of the plans that we've got, new projects that have been commissioned recently, show us our intentions for the next 10 years. I'm very, very happy to be with you and part of the Community Energy Week of events, which was amazing. It's been quite a long week for me, so I'm looking forward to catching up on them. Brilliant if they've been recorded. I hope I can get hold of them. Maybe Matthew or Kathleen can send them to me. I was also going to apologise. I feel a wee bit guilty because I always, when I'm watching an event like this, I end up just looking at the books that people have in the background and trying to work out what they have on the shelf. And I'm pretty boring here. I'm actually in the office just now, so apologies for that. But I'll get sharing my screen. Okay. Also, I do go into the tree arc, and because that's something that there's a few folk interested in, very happy to take any questions on that and spend a wee bit more time on it. It's a great project that we've been on, a nice facility, something I've really enjoyed learning about and being part of in my small piece as well. I've got notes up on the screen just behind this screen, so if you think I'm staring off into space, that's just what I'm doing. So yeah, just sharing some background on Horshader. I think we were the first community-owned wind turbine, community-owned wind turbine project, a 900 kilowatt turbine at Knockgary, Vichrishny, between South Shawbust and Dalbeck. Just to start off, I want to share a video, which is something we made kind of just as a thank you as well to Community Energy Scotland. And it was made a long time ago in June of this year. So it provides a chance for you to see a bit of sun in Shawbust, which isn't something we're seeing much of these days. And also just an example of a small community initiative that has a strong climate action focus. So I hope you can see the video. I hope it works and you enjoy. Hello, it's Mr. Ewan McLeod. I'm a manager Leslie the Brian Leslie Horshader, Stage Clearshire and Lowish. I'm Ewan McLeod. I'm a development manager at Horshader Community Development. It's based on the west side of Lewis and specifically the villages of South Shawbust, Dalmore and Dalbeck. I'm standing right now at our offices, the Ravat House, and this is our tree arc native tree nursery that's actually based in between South Braga and North Shawbust. We developed the Canalhuanya Green Connect project after the demand for deliveries in the local community increased enormously at the start of lockdown in 2020. We developed a number of stranded COVID services, and that included deliveries of ready meals, among other things, which is what I was doing today. That was the Bluster ready meal, and that's funded by Foundation Scotland's Resilience and Recovery Fund. And we deliver delicious and healthy, nutritious ready meals to over 65s in our community a couple of times each month. After developing the Cairngorm Green Connect project, we were fortunate to get the funding to purchase an e-cargo bike, which you saw today, and that was through the Islands Green Recovery Fund, which was the tail end of 2020. The bike is fantastic and it has an engine and it powers you up the hills, and when you're cycling into the wind, which if anyone has cycled in the Hebrides before, you'll know that the wind is the big enemy. The bike it's got a storage capacity of 60 kilograms and it allows us to take all sorts of things around the local community. And of course, it's a very green alternative to using the van or the bus. As we were developing the Cairngorm Green Connect project, we had a lot of support from Community Energy Scotland, in particular Matthew Logan, who really put us on to the possibility of using an e-bike in this way. And it's just been fantastic since we got hold of it earlier this year. Cycling around Lewis with the e-cargo bike is a real treat, and we would recommend it to other community groups and local businesses as an alternative to using carbon heavy modes of transport. For me, and on behalf of everyone at Horshader Community Development, we'd like to say thank you to the Islands Green Recovery Fund, who funded the project. Also, big thanks to Community Energy Scotland and to our own community. Thank you is
So I hope you liked the short video and Inside the Tree Arc, so more on that shortly. A little bit of background on the organisation. I'm sure some of you know already, but Horshader, community-owned charitable trust, established in 2005 to plan and run the wind turbine for the benefit of the island, but particularly South Shobas, Dalbeck and Dalmore. A population of around 150, so relatively wee community. These villages are in the Horshader area, which is based on the Dalmore estate. Many of our services, though, are delivered in North and New Shobas as well. Other services are delivered a wee bit further afield, so not complicated at all in that regard. After years of hard work and development, the turbine was in place and in operation by the end of 2012. It's owned and operated by Resort Power Group, and they gift all the profits to the charity after operating costs, loans and repayments. So I think everyone on this call will know, but the funds since that point provided a core income to the group, and it's an amazingly helpful thing to have a core income, and allows the group to really, it makes long-term planning possible without relying on going after little bits of funding and changing tack every few years. So it's definitely been a massive benefit to the local community. Before we look at a couple of the services and projects that have been established since that point, I'll just say that included in our original charitable objects was developing the community in a sustainable way that with the well-being and natural resources of generations to come being as important as today's needs. So this was written into the strategy from day one, and it's something that the directors and the staff keep in mind at all times. A quick look now just at some of the services we run, after which I'll talk a little bit more about some of the main eco projects. So Support and Connect project, first set up in 2014, designed with specific needs of our community in mind, but a similar story to many island communities, as to improve access to facilities and offer services that would otherwise we wouldn't be able to do either by individuals or by local firms. Shawbust and the local area here, a wonderful place to live, low on crime, good for health, beautiful, and employment opportunities, but very poor in terms of access to facilities. So we provide a minibus service that does the school run daily, regular runs for Clown and Lanier, the senior citizens group, does hires as well, and it's a big part of what we do. We also have a handyman service, which in the first place was doing more odd jobs around the community, but has developed into primarily a grass cutting service, and does 30 households plus other non-domestic sites. We employ to run this project coordinator, driver, admin officer, and assistant gardener. They're all 4 roles part-time at the moment, although it changes over the years. But yeah, it's also, particularly the grass cutting service is just a great way to get local young people involved, provide work, casual work. Community events is largely for the similar purposes. We've developed a program of events, offer opportunities for education, people getting together, cultural as well, exhibitions and concerts and ceilidhs, a lot of the time featuring local talent, also bringing people in from other areas. So it's since 2019 we developed the refurbished the Ravat House, a part of it, and that's now our community space, which as we speak there's a session ongoing. I was just saying to Matthew and Kathleen, we've had, I think it must be the strangest session on the island. We've had a didgeridoo there for the last 3 weeks, and it just plays one note in D, so they get a shout every time that there's a tune coming up in D. Coffee morning tomorrow as well, so there'll be some nice baking and a good crack there. More events. The one I wanted to bring up was the Slán San Daithí Healthy at Home, and that was a pilot set up based on the pandemic and the effects of, and it was mainly arranging outdoor events for all ages, and also creating resources, some online, some offline, for people that were housebound. Big success, and something we hope to continue now. I think it's an important part of what we do. Probably made us realize more, made us more aware than at any other point of the people that we weren't engaging. I think that's something that personally I thought was a big eye opener, but kind of became very apparent during the course of last year. COVID services in March 2020. Just days after the lockdown, the staff and directors got together and planned a lot of got together virtually, planned a way to assist and just make life easier at a very difficult time. We got set up quite quickly, developing 5 strands of services, and that meant that when the funding appeared around May, we were in a good position to go for that and fully fund the delivery of it for, I think, 4 or 5 months in the end. We worked with the neighbouring community Bragar Arno, Bragar Arno, who had no staff at the time. So we delivered 4 of the 5 services in their area as well, until the point that they hired staff once the initial project was over in September. It was the shop and drop service, the daily prescription deliveries, virtual engagement program, community support, and the Blaster ready meals, as you saw, delivering on the bike. So we all felt very lucky to be able to carry on and deliver these services at a time when a lot of other people were furloughed, and I think as well maybe the islands, we weren't as badly affected at the start of the lockdown. But I think I was focusing on this a little bit just because it demonstrates how, with proper staffing and management and support and an income, the community, it's obvious to say, but the community groups are best placed a lot of the time to deliver services and to react to the challenges of life. And I think it gave everyone a lot of confidence to put that plan into action. The HCD Community Fund, it's managed by the Horshader directors, usually gives out up to 30 to 50,000 per year, and that's in grants to local organizations, bursaries, training grants. There wasn't as many applications last year from local groups, a lot of them just weren't operating, but we also developed a new digital tech grant scheme that provided funding for laptops and tablets. And it made a big difference, as well as a lot of our young people were accessing remote learning, online learning for the first time. And of course, all of this is made possible by the funds generated by the turbine. So just on to a few of the projects that I wanted to highlight. The community growing sites. Horshader has really excellent community growing sites in Grunevat Road, South Shawbust, where we have 5 crubs, large crubs, and also 2 down in Dalmore. They house allotment holders. There's around 40 just now, although we're gearing up for next year, so we're waiting for letters to come back. And each grower gets, it could be a family or household or just an individual, but they get an indoor allotment and an outdoor growing space as well. So it's a great thing to have. Of course, our community is not exactly short of growing space, but I think that these facilities are ideal for older people that are perhaps infirm or unable to get out into croftland, and disabled people. And also it's just a great community and cooperation. Sadly, obviously my internet connection is unstable here. I hope it's sorry. Sadly, we've not been able to get the Shawbust School Garden Club back in since the start of the lockdown, and that was a big part of what we did at the growing sites. But we following the guidelines last year, we were able to keep it open to the allotment holders. It was a little bit the guidance was, I'm not sure if it was contradictory, but the guidance was they can remain open, so but you must tell the users that that's their one trip out every day. I think with the feedback we got from users that said they're praising the benefits for their mental health and even physical activity that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. This project was first set up with climate challenge funding, and that was in across 2014 and 15. And there were allotments at that point, but also an element of producing veg for commercial for sale. And across the life of the project, saved an estimated 19 tons of CO2 emissions through the production of the fruit and veg, a further 32 tons through local composting, reduction of local food waste, and reducing car usage. There were also many events like farmers markets and outreach to the local school. For one reason or another, over the years, the commercial aspect didn't work out as planned, and then the sites were converted into, as they currently are, an all allotment style. And from this staff side, this is much easier to run, of course, but we always look at different ways to use the site. And in the past, so last year it was very much on a rota basis and strict hygiene, but we had a bit of spare space, so we would grow flowers for planting out in the community. I think though it's just a great facilities to have, and the growers are supported ably by Chris Humphreys, the head gardener, and Billy Neil MacLeod, the assistant gardener. So it's a nice place to be. The Tree Arc upgrade, the expansion was commissioned at the start of 2020 with the aim of developing the relatively small scale tree nursery, which David Murdo Mackay had set up, and as a mainly conservation project focused on fast disappearing local indigenous trees, aspen and alder. And the idea was to expand and grow a lot more trees. The commercial demand and including, as DJ said, the Woodland Trust Woodland Croft Grant Scheme, we saw that as an opportunity, but also for our own use and for local community planting. The benefits of windbreaks in the local community are massive, and it's something that, as I'll get onto very shortly, is something that we're looking to do soon. So in 2020, the upgrade consisted of concreting floors of 2 polycrubs that we use at Ravat House. Previously, it was just 1 polycrub. We installed watering systems and built a new large netted tunnel area, which is a massive help. You can see down at the bottom left on the presentation there. The pandemic obviously affected construction, and it took a fair bit longer to complete. But by the end of 2020, we had the vast majority of it done. And this year has been probably the first year of, I wouldn't say full operation. I mean, there's still a few things to get finished, but it's been the first year that we've had a good run at it. And it's safe to say we made plenty of mistakes over the year, and the previous year were collecting seeds, and everyone was learning, but we learned a huge amount. Expanding the capacity has enabled us to grow, I think, if we're looking at per year, 10 times what we grew previously. And we to be honest with you, I set targets at last year, and we came just underneath the targets, and I was really gutted about that, because I was hoping we would smash right through it. But the team did a great job, and around half the trees grown have been sold. I think they're all actually, or the majority have been just private, and people taking a few thousand each. And not so many in the immediate local community, but slightly further afield down in Carloway. And so half have been sold, and the other half at the moment, we've got some left for sale, but a lot have been reserved for some projects that we have in mind. And it's just, I think, seeing it grow from what it was, and including the construction stage, has been really, really nice to see. Obviously great to be part of as well. All credit as well to the Treearc team for managing that. One bonus as well of having the facility is attracting funding to bring in additional staff. We had 3 young nursery workers this year, and they all did a great job, but learning the ropes, the main yearly seedings, pricking out and putting into cells from the trays, potting on into bigger pots, and just cleaning up. Also the seed collecting and getting cuttings for during the winter time in the last quarter. I don't know what you all think, but I think that's probably one of the best jobs you could have as someone just out of school. Definitely something that I would have loved to have done. So that's something that we'll really look to expand on and continue. Obviously, when we can as well, bring in the other local partners, the Scotia Borscht and other local groups that will come in, and we can involve them too. So I think I know there was some interest in it, but maybe rather than taking questions now, I'll just carry on, and then there'll be questions at the end, because there's a few things related to the Treearc sort of coming up. So just the final part of the presentation is some new projects. And the first thing is that we're getting started on, we want to work with a consultancy really to produce a decarbonisation strategy plan. At the moment, while we are a great example in some senses, we also use a diesel bus and van, and we have a pretty inefficient office and community space. And probably more than that, it's just that we don't have, as it were, the kind of vocabulary to get to a carbon neutrality and to make these changes. I think we all have an idea of what to do, but we don't really know how to put that into words. And that's why working with people that know, experts, is something that we've just got funding to do, which was really exciting. I think through this study, we'll get to where we want to be. I mean, it surely involves changes to efficiency, changes to the building, heating systems, and changes to the vehicles and the tools we use. But I'm sure there's a lot of other things I haven't thought of. And it's probably a case as well, actually measuring what we do, which we don't do a lot of at the moment. We're definitely not in any kind of coordinated way. So I'm aware there's some experts on in the meeting at the moment, and it's but it's just something that we're really looking to do in the next year. And the next one we've got up, this was a project first proposed in 2019, and by February of last year we had a skilled and exciting, diverse project team in place, and they'd met a couple of times and really developing this plan for a community woodland. And then unfortunately COVID, followed by directors that were driving the project resigning. But that's kind of life, that's how it goes. Despite the challenges, we kept on working away at it. It's always in the back of my mind. And we recently got hold of some funding to develop a feasibility study to take the project up to kind of the development stage proper, where we can go and I think what we need to know is where we want to do it, what it'll cost, and probably most important of all, is what the community thinks and what they would want from a project like this. Going back to the start of it, the original proposal of from my memory, it was a 10-acre single site forest with education facilities and a pond and all sorts of things, and kind of quickly realized that was insane, and took a lot of advice after that. I think smaller areas which would be developed separately, and then so that's seemingly better for the environment, better for birds, and etc. A much more sustainable approach. Saying that though, it was, I suppose, a good exercise to start big. That's not usually my style, but it's a good thing to start big, think big, and then work out, what's possible. Ultimately, plan is that this project will make use of the tree arc stock, some of, and also the staff, so that it can be really joined up. So these the images you're seeing here, this was stuff produced before, and before I start getting angry phone calls from anyone. These were kind of a wee bit of assessments of land to give us ideas of things. The next stage is get the full feasibility done and do all this properly, consult with the community. And finally, as a bit of a forerunner to that, we've just set up to find a bit of unused croft land or unused land, whether it's grazings, or if it's an individual and we'll take a long-term lease, and plant a couple of thousand native trees that we've grown. And it's hopefully to encourage more crofters and more residents doing the same. And also, I mean, you don't really need extra reasons to plant the trees. I think it's great anyway, but I think it would be good encouragement in that way. Also a good news story and a good way to promote the tree arc facility. In September, we got the UKISG accreditation, which is a benchmark for the Woodland Trust, or run by the Woodland Trust, that they look at. So kind of we're just about to announce these things and give it a bit of a fanfare for the work that's gone into it so far. So just in conclusion there, hope you enjoyed it, hearing some of the Horshader stories. And I think there's a lot of great work done. Probably the next thing we need to do is a new logo, because there's 3 turbines there and we only ever got 1. So I think that needs to be redesigned. But yeah, it's been a pleasure to be here, and I'd love to take any questions, particularly on the tree arc, if there's any specific points on that or thoughts.
Thanks very much, Ewan. You'll need to get some trees on there. No, that was great, and yeah, really interesting to see the whole progression, and particularly I think about all the tree stuff lately, which seems to be top on the agenda of the attendees tonight, what they're interested in as well. So I'll maybe, yeah, just to open it up to questions if anyone wants to ask you anything. Yeah, I've got a few things, but I'll hold those back, let everyone else go first. So feel free just to turn your microphones off and come in if anyone has a question. Ewan, go ahead.
I'll pick up from where Kathleen probably heard me finish off this afternoon's session. It's actually particularly interesting, trees in the community and selecting areas of land. And I got the impression it's early days yet, but I've similarly been approached by some of our members saying we want a community woodland, and 2 of them are school teachers. They've worked out where they want to put it, and I said it's a lot more complicated than that. It's subject to crop and tenure. We have to consider the soil type, and it's also been further complex by people talking about whether you should go for woodland or whether you should go for peatland action or the carbon credits for peat. And it looks like we're going to have to go down a route a bit like yourselves, find funding for a feasibility study, look at it at landscape level, do some mapping. But sharing learnings on that front would be really interesting, because the other bit, which I didn't dare bring up this afternoon, part of me sort of saying, well, if it's not sort of got sphagnum or a high water table and it's on a bit of a slope, surely you can plant trees and you can get carbon augmentation through not undermining the existing peat there, but trees will grow on peat. And it's looking into questions like that. And also, what if you took off the grazing pressure, would you get natural regeneration anyway? So there's quite a few questions kicking around. So if you've touched on any of those, I'd be very interested.
Yeah, it's a lot of the same questions that we had, and the working group, we were looking at that. It was much the same. I mean, I think I'll be very happy to share what we've done so far, which isn't a huge amount, but it's kind of the first steps, and it's what I've got to take the feasibility study to the next stage. I've kind of got the basis of the plan, and that allows me to go and speak to kind of groups that can actually do the study for us. My role in it was, I kind of speak about it too much, I bore myself, but the funding side. So I did a funding plan up. I was in no way the expert on the suitability of the land. We actually worked with a local consultant to produce some of what you saw there, which was the ground studies. And I think that's a challenge, really, where you're going to put it, because there's a lot of reasons not to plant in a particular area. So I think rather than try to answer it myself, I'd be really happy to either have another call with you and maybe I can send you some of what we have before.
And that would be great, even if it's a consultant, because the way I've been, it's quite funny. It must be the fact that, oh, by the way, I think you take after another Ewan in terms of your film. Ewan McGregor can come into the picture as well. But it's almost finding out who can do it. But like you, I started out thinking big, more at a landscape level, and looking how you could take crofters as well as, because if you did it at scale, you could potentially get shelter belts, you could improve stock condition, you could perhaps open up other areas for local produce, and that's the type of thing that seems to be emerging here. But there might be learnings from yourself. So yeah, it'd be great to link up at a future point. Thanks.
Yeah,
Can I suggest that you speak to Viv Halcrow, who works with us?
I've already sent Viv an email. She's based up in Lewis at the moment.
Yeah, she's very busy. But our approach was from the other end. We thought small because we knew that if we went for large acreages, we would stir up a hornet's nest and you'd get every inactive crofter from here to Timbuktu opposing it because they hate trees. But by taking that approach, it's, now we find it very, very difficult to cope with the demand from individual crofters and from townships who want to develop crofting forestry, along with Forestry Scotland and the Woodland Trust. And our approach was always to go out, give advice, first of all, look at the piece of land that the crofter or the village were thinking of developing. And almost invariably, the first piece of land that they were going to take us to look at was the scabbiest piece of grazing in the entire village or the area. But Viv is very good because she can recognize instantly whether an area of land will be good for native trees, and she will not hesitate to say there's no point in planting there. Trees will grow on peatland though, and part of the success of the project has been this approach by Viv, where she goes out, talks it through, looks at the area, and if it's a goer, then she will advise on which species of trees, native trees, will grow there. And all the trees that we supply, Point of Sandwich pay for all the trees, by the way, most of them came from Alba nurseries, and some of them came from across the water in Lochinvar. But the idea of working with Horshader, with Frank's Ark in Luurbost, and there was another one started up in Harris, and I've forgotten where that is. The idea of that is to do exactly what Ewan is doing with the Ark project, and that is to find the remnants of native trees, and they're still around. David Murdo was an expert on yumping all over Lewis Harris and all the Western Isles and collecting seed, and that's where you started off your native trees. So it can be done, and you can overcome resistance, and it is becoming more and more popular with crofters. And some of the crofters that we've been talking to are, they're getting elderly, they can't look after stock, and having a woodland is a great way of using the croft when you're not really all that physically able to look after stock. And Crofting Commission are quite happy with that use of stock. There are some areas as well where there's well-established native woodlands that can also be used for grazing. That's not a new thing either. It can't be used at the start until the trees get to a certain height and they won't be killed off by sheep or deer or cattle. But once they grow to a certain height, you can graze stock in there. One of the impediments that we found on the crofting forestry large scale was the need to deer-proof the areas. If you live in an area where marauding deer are a problem, and that can greatly add to the cost if you have to pay for fencing first before you plant any trees. So a lot of the stuff that we've been doing is the more wood scheme, where there's an acre or less of woodland, and that's been highly successful, really good. 160,000 trees planted in 4 years is not bad. I mean, 2 years ago, I think it was Michael Gove was boasting that they were going to plant 100,000 trees all over England in 5 years. I mean, we do that before breakfast. But there will come a time when you know, we will run out of steam on this project because it's been one of our flagship projects, and we would dearly love to see all the other community trusts using the expertise that we've developed in this area and coming in and developing it and helping us to keep it going. We've got a commitment to keep the project going for 25 years, as long as our turbines are earning. And in that time, I'm hoping that we'll have made inroads into changing a bit of the landscape, not all of it, increasing biodiversity and making people in the Western Isles see and appreciate trees. Great for mental health, great for well-being. And the other thing, before I finish my little sermon, is that we've also been thinking about how to maintain your woodland and what to do with the wood. I mean, you'll never be able to get enough to keep your wood burning stove going, because trees are really slow to grow, but they do need tending, especially after 10 years or so. You know, it can't get out of control. So things like willow will need coppicing. We plant them quite close together as well, so some of them might need to be felled to give more than a meter apart. But one of the things I've done myself successfully is transplant trees at 4 or 5 years old when they're getting too crowded at the meter spacing, and you can move them about. So that's the sermon ended.
Well, I'd like to come in just to reiterate what you're saying, DJ, because we had Viv over just to look at, you know, the common grazings around the back, and she was excellent. And it was a good example of how she seems to work with the peatland action. So it wasn't a case of them working against each other. They seemed to be, from what she was saying anyway, working very closely. And I think that was a really good way of working, because there's a certain peat depth, which means it shouldn't be an area for tree planting. And if it's above that depth, then it's a good area for trees. And I think that was a good way of approaching it. And it was an interesting thing to learn from that. And I like the idea of all the communities coming together and kind of building on what Point and Horshader have been doing, because especially on the native trees, I think that's, myself and Matthew were over at Horshader not that long ago, and just really impressed with the fact it was the native trees, and that we were able to, so, you know, it's locally sourced, and then that keeps on going. So greatly encouraged. I don't know, it probably feeds back to, it was mentioned on the Northeast meet, the session we had last night. And again, we talked about it on the crofting and peatland session this afternoon. And it just seems like an opportunity where having rangers across the islands would be a really useful thing for all the communities to have, and that links everyone together and hopefully ties in with some of the mapping and sort of zoning stuff that you're talking about in Barra, Ian. So I don't know, we're really, it's one of the points I've definitely taken away. I don't know, Ewan MacLeod, if you've had any rangers or any work with rangers in the past.
No, I suppose we're kind of getting into that stage, getting to think of that now. We're really learning as we go, but yeah, and fascinating to listen to DJ. Did we meet at the end of last year? Okay, I'm getting mixed up with the time, but that was so helpful. And Viv as well, in her role, has been a massive help to us. And for Ewan, I think the last time I spoke with Viv, is she moving to be more focused on Uist and Barra now, the Uists and Barra? So it's maybe a good time to get hold of her.
Yeah, Viv has now gone on to job share, but we've got somebody else to cover Lewis and Harris, Robin Reid, who lives down in the Bays area of Harris, used to work for RSPB. Some of you may know him, but now he's gone over to the dark side, and he's going to help us plant all these trees in Lewis and Harris. And Viv will continue to use Barra, Battersea. But they'll both work together, and they will, I'm quite sure, help whoever wants help. We're really fortunate that we got Viv at the very beginning, because she came to us from across the water in Loughin, where she was working with what's the name of the big estate there, public ownership, one of the first.
Ascent, is it?
Ascent, yeah. She helped set up a tree nursery in Ascent, which we got some of the trees of 4 years ago. It's quite a big nursery. So she's got a huge knowledge of not just trees, but all of, I can't remember what her degree is in, but it's, I mean, she can take you around your garden and point out the weeds and name them and how useful they are, which I really like. But she's really quite a fine, and I'm sure Robin will be good as well, and be great to get all of this going. And one of the great things for me is that, you know, in 25 years' time, if we plant all these trees, they'll be a nuisance to somebody when I'm long gone, and they'll curse me for planting trees. I covered my whole croft in trees 4 years ago. Everything was covered, but I left wee pathways so that I could wander about in there and take walks with the dogs. And that was in 2017. And already some of these trees are way over 6 feet. You know, so although at first when you're planting these puny wee cell-grown or bare root trees, you think, oh God, I'll never see this grow to maturity, but you will. And it's, you know, one of life's pleasures is seeing something like that grow, and it must be even better to grow it from seed. I grow some from seed, some successfully, some not so successful, but to see that tiny seed grow into something huge is just wonderful. And because it's native species, you get a lot of, we get otters down the bottom of the croft now from coming up from Babel Shore, and we get a huge variety of trees growing as well, of birds visiting. We've got a sparrowhawk, which is a bit of a nuisance because he takes the collared doves. Occasionally you see a slaughter in the morning, but I mean, that's nature, that's biodiversity, and to be encouraged.
Just feed in there very quickly. Kathleen, developing that ranger, we've had for the last year 2 rangers in Barron Battersea. The funding hasn't been confirmed for next year. And that's one of these issues where you get short-term funding for a year and there's no long-term continuity. So it's a good theme to pick up. The one other to throw out to everyone is we haven't got deer here, which is good. However, we have got people that like to go saging, and quite often with devastating effect. So muir burning saging is a major issue. And how does one control or regulate? Because you can imagine planting your whole croft, TJ, and then someone on an adjacent croft decides to go out saging, and potentially you lose everything.
I'm not even going to start telling you how I would feel. I would be bloody annoyed, and in killing mode. But I mean, people have to be sensible about all this as well, and the community have to buy into it, or a crofting village have to buy into it as well, so that incidents like that do not happen. I mean, it'd be quite devastating to lose those trees. I don't know if you remember, there used to be a shelter of conifers down in Leverborough, and the mid-80s, I think they were planted during the IDP, the Integrated Development Program. Some of you are not old enough to remember that, but they were planted and they had a fire in the summer, and all of a sudden, must have been about an acre. They were planted all along the roadside, and it was one of the saddest sights ever to see all that burnt to a cinder. And the other really sad sight that I remember, you might remember this, Kathleen, is some years ago, 20 years ago, maybe more, we had a pine beauty moth in Garnahaina, and over a spring and summer, they stripped all these trees. They just kill them off, the pine beauty moth. And one of the advantages of doing what we're doing is planting a whole variety of different native species, is that they will grow in this environment. And even if you get one pest attacking one tree, they're not going to devastate your whole woodland, and trees will recover.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember, yeah, I do remember that. And it just looked just terrible, you know, so sad to see.
And is there anything, just kind of a general question, is there any sort of set of, I don't know, targets for reforesting the Outer Hebrides or planting trees on the Outer Hebrides, or some kind of strategy? I don't even know if that would be useful. I mean, it sounds like there's plenty going on without that, and that's maybe just focusing on the wrong side of things. But is there anything like that that exists at the moment?
I don't think there is. The council at one stage employed a forestry officer, and when we first started thinking about doing woodland, we were engaging with him, but he left, and the council never replaced him. He was quite good. I forget his name, but again, it's, you know, funding comes and funding goes, and when funding goes, unfortunately, projects fall. But one of the things that we're determined to do is to keep this going for 25 years. So, you know, there will be continuity there. But as far as I know, there is no document you can go to and say that's a Western Isles forestry strategy. You might be able to get something from Forestry Scotland, but they have, by and large, left us alone, and they're quite good. I think probably because Viv charms them, and you know, she won't try to bullshit them either. And we've kept SNH on side as well. They haven't raised any objections to what we're doing at all, and we're quite open about what we do and what we aim to do. And in fact, they see the value of it, so much so that when our turbine failed because of the break last year, Forestry Scotland stepped in with cash to keep the project going, which was really good. We'd have found some way of keeping it going anyway, but the fact that they were willing to do that shows that they set some value on it as well.
Yeah. And a question maybe partly for you, DJ, but also for you, and in terms of what you're sort of, I don't know, who you'll be promoting stuff to, what tends to be the kind of motivations people would have for planting trees on their croft? Is it because, as you said earlier, they kind of want to use the land in a less active way, or is it kind of they want to create better habitats, or they do want to have some kind of fuel source in the long-term future? Do you get much of a sense of what the motivation is for people?
I think there's a whole variety of motivation for a lot of people, and some of it is, you know, their neighbor might have done it, so they're going to do it too, or some of it is because they particularly like trees but weren't sure how to do it. They will go and advise them and hold their hand through the entire process. I mean, for people who are born and bred in the Western Isles, trees are not something that you know anything about. You'll recognize one, but you won't be able to name it because they're so few and far between. And I think there was that kind of feeling. And there was also the feeling that trees, because they couldn't be eaten and they kept precious grazing away from animals, were of no use at all. But all that has changed, and it's changed in the last 30, 40 years. I mean, 50 years ago, you would be very, very hard pushed to find a crofter with a nice, well-developed garden, for instance. Now you'd be hard pushed to find a crofter who doesn't have a nicely developed garden around the house and landscaping around the house. So that's changed, and I think with the Crofting Forestry Act in 1993, which Colin MacDonald, whom you know, got through Parliament as a private member's bill when he was crofter, when he was an MP, sorry. Up until that time, any tree that you grew anywhere on crofting land belonged to the landlord. So there was no incentive on establishing any kind of forestry or native trees or whatever. But then in 1993, this act was passed, and in 94, Crofting Forestry Commission started giving really excellent grants for crofting forestry in the Western Isles, and that's when you saw all these bits of pine forestry spring up, reclaimed land. Quite a lot of crofters in Point and Sandwich did that, and you were paid a subsidy for 20 years for doing that, and a lot of cash flowed into village coffers for doing that. I think it was at the same time there was tax breaks for celebrities when they devastated the Flood country in Caithness with mad schemes of forestry, which thankfully they're now getting that restored back to bog. But that's a long-winded answer to your question, Matthew. I don't think there is a single motivation. So, you know, whole load of different reasons why people do it. And, you know, it doesn't matter what the motivation is, as long as they want to do it, and that help to do it.
Yeah, I don't want to take us off the kind of tree area of things, but I did have a question for Ewan McLeod about a different part of your presentation. So yeah, I don't know if there's any more discussion on the trees that people want to have though before asking that.
Go and we can just go back to trees after.
Yeah, I think we might. It was just about the kind of decarbonisation plan you mentioned, Ewan. Am I right in kind of thinking that's sort of like an organisational plan rather than looking at, say, the communities and every household that's inside your remit at this stage? That's just kind of focusing on the organisation.
Yeah. Just on purely an organisation, and I think in a way just to start small again, start with what sort of around us, what we can get onto. The support and connect project was probably what inspired that in the first place, because we've had the bus for 5 or 6 years now, and so you're already thinking about replacing it. I know Matthew, you set up calls with the Orkney group, some of the Orkney groups, where we heard about their experience with electric vehicles. So that was probably what kicked the idea off for us. But then once you start thinking, it's all these targets for carbon neutrality, and it's coming up. It'll be there soon, sooner than we think. So we're gonna want to get onto it, yeah. And
I'm not sort of suggesting that you do this. I guess it's fairly contentious, this whole kind of net zero, if that's a phrase that should be used. But do you think you'd take that into account in terms of all these trees you're growing and potentially planting? I guess there's a lot of captured carbon that you could claim to have some involvement in. I don't know if you've got that far and you think it's just an idea.
No, the thinking is it's going to come from the experts.
Yeah.
I mean, if I've used the wrong term there, then it kind of shows, makes the point.
No, I don't think you'd use any term.
No, but I would like to think so, and the other work that we do, and I mean, I would like to think you, even by providing the facilities to the local community, and even things like the prescription deliveries, if that happens 3 times a week and it saves, generally it could be up to 100 people a week or anywhere around that, from a 10-mile journey, you're saving a lot of, you're saving a fair bit on car usage. So it's all these things just to take it into account, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to actually just on your question about the motivation, from our experience from the last year and a bit, just as DJ said, no, there's no real one motivation for getting the trees from us, and sometimes improving the craft. There was a couple where they were getting rid of sheep. Maybe they were getting to an older age and they didn't want the sheep anymore. But I think most of the orders were actually from active crofters, and they were seeing it as just a way to improve the craft, and it went hand in hand with having livestock and sheep, animals. Also, just on the Ewan's question about kind of how do you manage it, and I think that maybe that was particularly relevant for a croft, because you've got maybe neighbours. We, again, not knowing a huge amount, not having the experience of doing it, we rely a lot, and I rely personally on people that have done it on their own crafts. I think it will be annoyed at me for saying, but Boyd Mackenzie, a really good friend, his craft in Back, if you've seen it, he planted the trees there, kind of a shelter bit first, and then all kinds of native trees 30 years ago. So that's really an amazing, it's pretty incredible to see. And I think there's mainly just kind of bare crafts around it, but it would be speaking to people that have gone through that themselves. That's where I would get advice from.
I suppose the one question, but it seems a lot of the examples are about individual crafts. Has anyone had any experience of working in partnership? Because part of the problem I think we've got down here is that historically, I think on the island, everyone had access to a craft. Now you're maybe only talking about 50, 60% of households, maybe less. And it's the wider community almost looking for a community woodland on common grazing, and how we would take forward such a proposition working with the shareholders. I think that's the challenge. We'll get there.
I would say it's worth an approach, and when we set up the working group, we had I don't think he was the chair at that point, but we had an active member of the South Shawbus Grazings Committee. He was involved. Again, he's planted trees on his own craft, I'm pretty sure. And I think you don't know. Our experience with dealing with the local grazings was that they were supportive of really any development, and including trees.
But I get the lesson from both yourself and DJ. Do it small, almost like stepping stones. And what I've also heard anecdotally from Viv anyway is if you go for small plots, then you're going to get natural seeding from them eventually anyway. If you've got adjacent areas and you've got stock excluded from, so that you can start from small and expand out.
I think one I just remember from the initial bits of work we did was that it's a lot less risky. There's a lot less risk if you go smaller plots rather than doing a big one. And then I think even storms can be a big killer. If a storm comes, wind going the wrong way at an early point, it can devastate what you've planted.
I pick up on one that links with your decarbonisation plan, but also back at what Matthew was saying, that how many people here have heard of the Scottish Government's programme that they're working up at the moment, Carbon Neutral Island? Because I think, Matthew, that's where you're coming from, and if there should be a wider strategy. They're apparently working on the selection criteria at the moment. We had one meeting by chance with a guy called Francesco from Strathclyde, who's been seconded by the Scottish Government to be the project lead. But I think it's from initiatives like that, whilst they perhaps only choose between 3 to 6 islands, and the intention is to cascade out the learnings to all the inhabited islands, which off the top of my head, something like 95. So it's, I applaud doing it in-house, but I think Matthew's right that again, that could be a stepping stone, but then we can perhaps look at having a wider across the whole of the Western Isles. Is that what you're thinking, Matthew?
Yeah, just wondering. I mean, I think it's just such a complex thing, and so I was just wondering kind of at what scale Horshader were planning on doing it. I definitely think starting with the organisation, building from there, seems a good way to do it. But yeah, as you say, Ewan, the quicker we can get to that whole system thinking, because everything is so linked. And in the islands, we're in some ways quite well placed because we're more capable of kind of controlling everything within our own environment. Yeah, the better. But starting small, as you've said, with the woodlands kind of seems the best way to build up to it for me. But it'll be interesting to see with those zero carbon islands. I think that's maybe the name of the program.
They've
Yeah.
given them, that's the third name I've heard from it. I've heard it called net zero, zero carbon. I think it's erring towards, from the press reports I've seen, carbon neutral, but we'll see.
Yeah. One last question I had, sort of going back to the trees again, Lillian, was when you mentioned the growing stuff at one of Horshadow's earlier projects, and sort of mentioned there was plans to have a commercial element to that, but it wasn't possible for various reasons. But I guess, does it seem like with the ARC project and the tree nursery, not that that's your main motivation, but that's kind of a surer bet commercially, or it's looking, I guess, with the grants and with the interest that's coming about, does that seem like that will be quite I don't know, not substantial commercial element, but quite reliable, I guess?
Yeah, I think that when I wasn't involved when the CCF project was going on, so I can't say, and I don't know, I did say there it was easier for the staff to ditch that and to go into the allotment style only. I think it's hard to manage and distributing the veg around. We haven't thought much. I've thought about that since the tree arc. When I came to Horshader, I think the board were very keen to develop that as a sustainable business, really, as something that can eventually sustain a few jobs. And I think we had, it was kind of early days when I started with Horshader, and I think because the output from the facility, but what you're doing is going to be beneficial anyway. We had some studies done over the years, windbreak reports in particular, something that we haven't looked too much at because I think we've got a few things going on at the moment with it, but planting small amounts of trees just for local residents, that's something we'd really like to do as well. See the report produced by a local expert on the subject, and the benefits are just incredible for the local environment. So that made it I think it's made it easier for us to decide to invest in the facility, because what we were doing was going to be good anyway. Obviously, it's I think the encouragement from working with the other groups, Pint and Sandwick, and it was a factor as well, of course, because we had support there. So yeah, but to answer the question, definitely as commercial, but as a way of creating something sustainable that can carry on. I hope the turbine is going to carry on for many years, but we have to look at other sources of income as well, and things that can continue for years and years to come. Yeah.
No, I think that is a great part of it, but as you're saying, it sort of has so many benefits, both, for yourselves growing the trees, but then anyone who's planting them just brings a lot of different elements to an area. So that's great.
I'm going to go really off topic and ask about the minibus. In terms of how are you finding that? I know that like community transport and minibuses they're often talked about in communities, but there's so much maintenance and running costs, and I was just wondering how that's going, and also the fact that it's doing a school run. Is that I've never asked the question, but is it not a council, did the council pay you for that or not?
No, well, the project it's been funded by the Scottish Government since it was started in 2014. I think at the moment it's investing in Communities Fund, and the school run, the kids would be eligible to go on another bus, and the ones in Shawbust, Dalmore and Dalbeck, they live so close anyway, so that's something that we do. You know, it takes half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the afternoon. The buses are always full though, and I think when that was originally set up, it was just seen as more of a kind of community spirited, a nice run to do. But primarily the bus works for the kind of local groups, providing mainly kind of the Colin Lanier senior citizens groups, but other clubs, the school and other local partners that use the bus to go across the islands, and it's been off island quite a few times as well for annual trips and things like that. We don't get a grant from the council, but we get grants as a bus operator. I think we're hoping, of course, to continue the project, but we do always have to have an eye on how to run it in the event of the funding changing or losing the funding altogether. And we've made plans for that, but I think it would be more difficult. To be honest, probably something that the trust would have to subsidize in some way. I don't think it's a big money maker for us, but we are a relatively small community. I think a couple of years ago there, when there was all the changes to the local transport, again, it felt like there was an opportunity to develop something and to work with the corner, but I think that again, that was sort of, what was that, end of 2019, start of 2020, and things changed a lot since then. So it's something we will look at as a way of keeping the project going, because I think just for the local groups, it's really good to use.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's always one of these ones, you never know which way, whether it's going to be well used or not. It depends, every community is different, so it does sound like you're just doing well, so that's good.
Can I make a quick point on that one? Worthwhile, Ewan, looking at, because Matthew and I got involved supporting Voluntary Action Baron-Verts, who operate the community transport down here. It was one of these classics where the islands group obviously had funding for green transport, and we got invited because it been included in the islands plan, and so we cobbled together an application, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matthew, I think we landed 190,000 for EV chargers and 2 new electric minibuses. So what I'm saying is there seems to be an appetite out there with funders for doing the transition, and it would, in the long run, reduce your operating costs.
Yeah, I would hope there'll be more opportunities like that. I mean, I think it's still a bit of a gap. That fund was sort of a one-off. It seemed to kind of come out of nowhere, but there isn't a kind of dedicated fund for community transport providers to transition to electric vehicles yet, although there was an expression of interest, kind of invitation from the Energy Savings Trust. But hopefully, you know, because I know Taxa Uist have also had some money to buy EVs, but yeah, it would be fair to say it's not that Ewan McLeod hasn't tried, because I think I'm right in saying that the e-cargo bike sort of came around from an application for a van or a minibus, which the funders seem to lose a zero off at some point.
That's right. It wasn't even a zero. I think we had applied for something like 60-something thousand, and we got an email through saying you've got 4,500. So I was straight on the emails to Matthew asking what we could do with that. And luckily it worked out really well and been a good project, especially to promote electric transport locally, but yeah, it's something. I think I saw Barra. Did Barra get something recently as well? Is that what you were meaning?
No, there's a sad tale on that one. It's actually another outfit in Barra that it'd be great if you could link up with. That's Garapatua.
Right.
And we did help them about 2 years ago get battery solar storage for their pre-existing wind turbine so that they could install electric vehicle chargers as an other source of income. And more recently, they applied for solar PV, and they were successful through both CARES and the most recent Islands Community Fund. But then they've just been told by the SSE that no new assets are allowed on the network. So they've got all the funding in place, and we're fighting a rearguard action to get the network operator to revisit it and say, yes, it's okay. Otherwise, they'll have to return all the money.
Oh, hope it goes well with you. Good luck. Yeah.
Well, we're giving it our best shot.
It's bound to work.
It is after. Were you in that meeting where I ambushed the
Yeah, that's why I think you'll get it all right. Copy us all in.
Okay, well, I think that's, yeah, I'm just keeping an eye on the time, and I think we're about there in terms of getting to the end of our session. There's just a couple of things I wanted to have a quick look at before going off. One of them is a link I'm just going to post in the Zoom chat just now, which is to a kind of a Miro board, which is an online kind of participation tool. So if you click that, you should be brought through to a map. And on this map, we've kind of been trying at various points throughout the week to add some of the kind of sustainability or community projects that we've been hearing about on there. I have kind of taken the liberty and added a few of our presenters just to kind of start to populate it a little bit. So I think Hebridean Arc might be on there with a little post-it note. But yeah, if that's I don't know, something that you'd like to add any more projects to of any type, if they're kind of transport or yeah, more on the land use and tree growing side, then that would be much appreciated. And yeah, we'll hope to kind of take that into some sort of community climate action directory at some point, I think. So that's there. If you've got the link now, you should be able to access that. And then finally, just to say, tomorrow is our last day of this week of events. So we've got something in the morning about climate change adaptation, which has members of the climate change working group and also the climate beacon presenting at it. So if you've heard those terms banded around and you have no idea what they do, then come along and find out tomorrow morning, I'd say. And then in the afternoon, we're hosting a climate question time with our two local representatives, Angus McNeil and Alistair Allen. Kathleen will be chairing and grilling them, I believe, and we'll hopefully cover lots of the different topics we've talked about this week and take some of the kind of points that have emerged over the discussions to them as well. So that should be quite an interesting session. Last thing, just to say thank you so much for Ewan, for your presentation. That's really interesting, and yeah, all the best with the project as it develops. I'm sure it'll be a huge success. And thanks to everyone else for coming along and yeah, taking part in the discussion. It's been really interesting again this evening.
Thanks to you, Matthew. And I would just say I was really knackered, and I was kind of thinking, oh, dreading it a wee bit. It was coming up, but really brilliant to speak to you all. That was brilliant. Yeah, thank you so much.